We are live. Hi, everyone. I'm Elmira. I'm the author of the Interrupter Substack.
And I'm Frida Gitis. I'm the author of the Insight Substack, and I'm also the senior columnist for World Politics Review and an on-air contributor for CNN.
So, Frida, we're going to talk about Jeffrey Epstein. I know that you last week published a post on this topic about Epstein's global reach. It's been 2 weeks since the Department of Justice released all of these files, and it has been nonstop in the news, implicating a lot of individuals, not only in the United States, but across the world. And I'm really excited that we're going to be talking about this because I think that there's so many different aspects to this, but maybe we can start by you talking a little bit about your post and give us a little bit of a background on that.
Yeah, sure. The whole Epstein scandal started, as we know, many years ago, and for many years it was a story of sordid, shocking sexual abuse of a powerful, wealthy man getting special treatment, uh, being involved with other powerful men to exploit women, and that was pretty much what it was. It was, it was terrible enough, but as time has passed, this has become a a a web of scandals with much larger implications than the exploitation of women. And we sense it in the United States, but in other countries, it is really sending shockwaves. And this release of millions of documents, this is the biggest crowdsourced project in the history of the world. People all over the world are looking at these documents. They are digging up information, and this is really affecting the political reality in many countries. And we'll talk specifically about some of those places. But one of the aspects of this web of scandals that I found interesting is the impact that I think it will have on the ongoing, the already pre-existing wave of populism in the world. What we're seeing here seems made to order for demagogues, for politicians on the left and on the right who ride public discontent, populists who tell the public there's an elite that is treated differently, that is benefiting from what happens in the world, and there are hidden conspiracies that rule the world. All these ideas, all these notions that sound the province of crackpots, suddenly in these Epstein files, they look like reality. Suddenly it looks like the conspiracy theorists had it right. So what I fear is that this, among the many ugly repercussions of this series of scandals, is that this is going to give new strength to this wave of populism, of anti-democratic, of sentiment of rejection of expertise. This is going to be, the elites are not to be trusted, and it's going to be jet fuel, rocket fuel for this wave that was already in place.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, it really, when I started diving into this, the level of gatekeeping that Jeffrey Epstein was able to do and how a lot of these individuals really benefited from kind of the secrets and the horse trading and the transactionalism really for me, it put into focus how the closed networks really just want to keep it that way. And so to your point about the populists and the strongmen, they definitely, I think that they're seeing kind of the architecture of how Jeffrey Epstein used this network. And the fact that he had this global network, I had a friend who messaged me over the weekend and he wrote me and he said, I can't keep up with 5 people at the same time. I don't know how Jeffrey Epstein kept up with people all over the world.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. What Jeffrey Epstein was, setting aside all the horrific, really, and we can't setting aside for a moment the sexual part, which was, we can't forget that, but we'll set it aside for a moment.
Yes.
Above all, he was an influence peddler. He trafficked in access. He made contacts and sold contact to other contacts in exchange for other contact and in exchange for other things. I mean, we've seen that he got access to confidential information of some government programs to deal with financial crises, which is potentially an incredibly lucrative bit of information. But above all, we were talking a little bit before we started this about this thing with China. Jeffrey Epstein was telling certain people that he knew, other people who had contacts in China. It was uh, the former Prince Andrew apparently was supposed to have very good contacts in China. So Jeffrey Epstein could go to somebody else and say, well, I know somebody who can get you in with China. And he did that with powerful people, powerful governments, influential figures all over the world. And again, this is a scandal. It's not of the left and it's not of the right. It's not of Muslims and Jews, or it's everybody: Arabs, Israelis,
Russia.
Europeans, Asian, Russians. So many Russians, so many Russians. And we have millions of documents. And one point that I think is really important here: we have something like 3.5 million documents. That is a tiny fraction of the total, because I was looking at the numbers for that. Um, Pam Bondi, who is becoming even more infamous by the day after her performance in Congress, Pam Bondi told the federal judge in January that the Department of Justice had released less than 1% of the documents back when they had released 125,000 documents. So if that were 125,000 documents were 1%, she's saying it was, that was less than 1%, but let's say it was 1%. That means that the 3.5 million that they have released until now is about 28% of the total. So even a generous interpretation of what she has said means that the overwhelming majority of the documents have not been released, and they spent so much time on it that who knows what it is that they are still refusing to release. I mean, it is clear that the Department of Justice of the United States uh, wants to put this behind us. President Trump has said this is over. After calling it after riding the wave of populism,
Yeah.
when he was a candidate, he really played this masterfully. He promised he would be the one who would release the documents, and he stoked all these conspiracy theories. He made suggestions that maybe Bill Clinton had something to do with the death of
Right.
Jeffrey Epstein. So he really benefited from it, but then he lost control. And right now, it's clear that the Department of Justice is not interested in being forthcoming with the information and the documents.
No, it has had. I think the documents that have been released, though, I think the interesting bit of it is the implications and impact that it has had overseas. And so you talked about how it's shaking up governments. We've seen already how in Slovakia the national security advisor has resigned. In Dubai, the official who was the head of the Dubai Global, and there are lots of photographs of him, the CEO, with Jeffrey Epstein, and he has over the weekend he resigned. And there's calls for the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer to step down, essentially not because Keir Starmer's implicated in the Epstein files, but because he had appointed Peter Mandelson, who he appointed Peter Mandelson to be the UK ambassador to the United States, even though it was well known that Mandelson did have ties with Epstein beforehand and that there was not enough vetting. And it's interesting that you brought up China, because one of the key figures that Epstein was using to try to get into China and to try to do business in China, particularly in the real estate market, was Peter Mandelson. And so I think it's fascinating the individuals that he was actually that Jeffrey Epstein was able to bring into his orbit and who were willing to open doors for him and push them through in order to get this entire global reach.
Yeah, and we see in the UK a government that could actually fall because of this, and contrast that to what is happening in the United States, where there are private implications, private organizations The head of a major law firm has resigned. I mean, we have individuals and
Well, he didn't
or
resign. He resigned from his chairmanship.
oh, okay, I stand corrected.
That was Brian
The
Karp,
yeah.
and he didn't lose his job.
Oh, okay. I was under the misimpression that he did. Isn't that interesting? But it's interesting to compare how other countries have responded to this these scandals. In Dubai, the head of DP World this gigantic organization owned by the government of Dubai that runs ports all over the world. He resigned. I suspect he was fired. In democratic countries, there are investigations. Very interestingly, in Poland, Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said that he thinks Jeffrey Epstein was working for that the entire Epstein operation was the brainchild of Russian intelligence, which is really, really interesting. But you have investigations. We have in Norway. Uh, there's a major investigation going on, and we talked about this earlier that Terje Rod Larson, who used to be a very, very respected diplomat. He played an important role in the Geneva Accords between Israel and Palestinians. And I found that my own name in the Epstein files because he was sending articles for Epstein to read, and he happened to send a few of mine to him. But that's no. He and his wife are both under investigation. They did apparently, allegedly terrible things. He was the head of the I think it's called the International Peace Institute, and he used that to bring allegedly to bring young women from Eastern Europe and Russia to the United States for Epstein. So and these are people who are highly respected, and in Norway he is under investigation. Different countries are handling this differently, and the way and I'm talking about the governments, how governments are handling it. The United States government is basically, it's or the administration, the Trump administration, is doing the least it can possibly do. It's Congress pushing for action, and there's just so much there. We know that members of Trump's cabinet had lied about
Yes,
having
Howard
ties to
Lutnick.
Howard Lutnick. So the government in the United States is trying to sweep this under the rug. Too late for that, but it's really embarrassing before the world that the United States at this time does not have the willingness, that this administration does not have the willingness to confront the people who were engaged in this horrific operation, horrific from the standpoint of abusing women, and very, 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 very troubling because of the exchanges of private information. You mentioned uh, Peter Mendelssohn. He apparently gave Epstein details of what the British government was going to do to tackle the economic crisis of 2008. That's that information should not be available to private individuals.
Well,
We know.
apparently the prince formerly known as Andrew also did apparently he did the same thing. And it was interesting how Buckingham Palace and King Charles actually got in front of it and stripped him of his title and his royal castle. And Prince William and Princess Catherine issued a statement. I think that is very interesting. I think that they know that there's more to come on that.
Well, and I think when a country is open about this, when the country really makes a concerted, visible, tangible effort to get to the bottom of the allegations, then it clears up the doubts. It
Yes.
attacks the conspiracy theories, and the way the United States is handling it is going to only throw more fuel on that fire. I saw that. Chinese, because there are so many secrets, and because we know that there will continue to be a lot of secrets. When you don't know the truth, anything can be true. And you have, for example, uh, people online on the internet working for the Chinese government have been spreading rumors about the Dalai Lama and Epstein, for God's sake. So this opens the stage for people who have intentions that are nefarious intentions, to have a path to create more disruption, to create more trouble for democracies that are already under assault.
Yeah. I did want to pick up on I don't want to ignore the victims here and I mean the level of abuse that Jeffrey Epstein himself engaged in and the access that he gave to so many of these men to these women. And I've been thinking a lot about it and reading back on, how did Jeffrey Epstein, how did he make his money? And he was just doing so many of these things, and my heart goes out to all of these women. You just listen to their to their stories, and Virginia um Giffrey, who committed suicide. She wrote the tell-all book about her experience with Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, the one thing that is so, I mean, it shouldn't be stunning to me because I'm somebody who really thinks about gender and feminism all of the time, is how women were just these disposable creatures. They just didn't matter. They weren't even human to Epstein and all of these men in this coterie who engaged in this and who enjoyed having Jeffrey Epstein's company.
Well, it's interesting and really tragic to think that you have this network. There are hundreds of perpetrators, maybe thousands. The overwhelming majority of them were men. Clearly, there were some women who were facilitators, and
Sure.
maybe some women were involved. But this was a men's club. This is like a horror version of a men's club. And with all of that, with hundreds of victims, hundreds, maybe thousands of perpetrators, there's only one person in prison in the United States over this scandal. One person, and it just happens to be a woman. She deserves to be in prison, Ghislaine Maxwell. But how can that be that with all of this, I've heard that there are more than 1,000 victims. There are so many who have come forward with so many women being abused, with so many crimes being committed and committed mostly by men. There is only one person in prison. Nobody else is being prosecuted. When Epstein was arrested, as we all know, he was given this ridiculous jail sentence where he
Right.
could
Stay
go
at home.
home during the day. It was
Yes.
it was a joke. It was an embarrassment. I mean, this is Epstein was the main guilty person, and all his accomplices were guilty. But this is just such a stain on the U.S. judicial system. This is just such a stain on the entire system of justice in this country. It's really, really, really shameful. And at some point, when normalcy of some sort returns to this country, I think this maybe will be reviewed. For lessons learned, because this is just unconscionable. And we thought we had it. We've always known that the justice system in the United States is flawed, but the degree of depravity, and the dearth of punishment is just astonishing.
Now, one of the things that I think you wrote it in your post, one of the reasons that the Trump administration and Trump himself is so hesitant to actually really dig in and trying to and release more files, because of the Russian connection. And that a lot of this money was coming, that Epstein was getting, was either coming from Moscow, through the Russian connections that he had. I have my own personal theory. I think it was actually the Chinese, but that's my own conspiracy theory. But then there's also been rumors about him being implicated because Ehud Barak, who was a former prime minister of Israel, that there were secrets, that the Israeli intelligence was also involved. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Okay, well, I'll tell you my thoughts on the Israel thing, and then I'll tell you my thoughts on the Russia thing. The Ehud Barak thing has been, it has been percolating for years. Even the theories about that, and of course, conspiracy theorists love nothing more than to blame the Mossad for everything that happens in the
Sure,
world.
sure.
Uh, but now we have all these documents, and there's no question, of course, that Ehud Barak, the former Israeli prime minister, uh, was close to Epstein. There's no question of that. There have always been pictures of him walking into Epstein's house. Uh, but when the files were released, all these amateur sleuths went into the files, and the people who have been stoking conspiracy theories about the Mossad and about Israel, not including Tucker Carlson, who loves to blame Israel for this, they have all gone and started to look to dig up material on Barak, and there's nothing. There's enough for a big scandal in Israel, not enough to blame. To link Epstein to the Mossad, as far as I can see so far. There's a big scandal in Israel because there was this long recorded conversation that was released, a long telephone conversation between Barak and Epstein. And Barak was talking about what kind of beautiful women he would like to bring. He thinks should immigrate into Israel, the tall, slender ones. So that's a big scandal. Now about Russia, and of course, again, I'll say we have not seen all the documents, but
Right.
no,
Right.
on Russia, I'll tell you this. I mentioned earlier that the Polish prime minister thinks, this is not my conspiracy theory. This is the prime minister of Poland who says that he thinks the Epstein operation was run by Russian intelligence. Somebody else with a pretty good head on his shoulders, Philip O'Brien, from the University of St Andrews in Scotland, and from CSIS, from the Center for Strategic and International Studies. He says that the Epstein files basically put the pieces in place, answering the question of why is Trump so subservient to Putin. We this has been a question, a mystery since Trump first came on the scene. Why is it that Trump he's such a tough guy with everybody in the world except Putin? He doesn't let anybody say a bad word about him. He lets Putin walk all over him. Professor O'Brien thinks that it was the Russians who organized this, that they have material on Trump. And when you think about it, when you think about the FSB, the former KGB, their heirs, that all the work they have to do to set up what they call a honey trap,
Sure.
to create a situation where they can get usually a man in a compromising position so that he can later be blackmailed, and they can pressure him to do things to the benefit of Russia. Imagine all that they have to go through to get one person. And now look at what Epstein has done. I mean, he had hundreds, maybe thousands of people that
Yes.
he was recording and that he knew about, that he had, a lot of people who were Kremlin insiders are in the Epstein documents. So I think there's a Russian angle here that will develop over time. I don't know that Epstein was a Russian agent, but I think it's quite likely that he was he was trading information in exchange for information and for money. The information access were his currency, and Russia was a great place for that for him.
Well, what's interesting about the files and the connection with Russia is that Epstein really wanted to have FaceTime with Vladimir Putin, and he never got it. And we all know that Vladimir Putin was himself a KGB agent back during when it was the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Again, we don't have all of the facts, but I think it is very interesting, and going in and looking to see how Epstein always wanted to say that he had FaceTime with all of these leaders and all of these individuals. He never got the FaceTime with Vladimir Putin. The other individual that I went and I searched in the files was the Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And Epstein makes reference to, possibly having some sort of meeting with Erdogan, but there's no record of it. And then he goes silent on it. And it's one of these things where he just wants to go around and kind of show how he has access to all of these individuals, which makes him the perfect target for intelligence operatives, right?
Right. And the other world leader that we don't actually hear a lot about, not for lack of him being in the files, is Donald Trump. He's all over the Epstein files. I think we hear about it in social media, but the main news organizations
Sure.
are avoiding the topic like it's poison, even though he is all over the files. And there is some horribly damning stuff in the files. I think I included a link to one of the documents in my piece. with really, really horrendous accusations against Trump that were made by women who gave the testimony. But again, none of this is confirmed. None, these are allegations. None of it is confirmed. Uh, just having your name in the files is not evidence of any crime, and I say it because because my name is in the files, but in a context that is not incriminating. Trump, of course, somebody could have said that to go after him, but we don't know. And this particular document that is something of a summary of accusations against Trump was released by the DOJ, and then it was withdrawn. And very quickly after they released it, they withdrew it. But it had been out there long enough that several people got screenshots, and they started saying, why has this document been withdrawn? And then they released it again. I find it very interesting that you don't hear a lot of talk about that, but it's just some really, really, really horrific stuff. So there is so much that we don't know, and that it troubles me to see the situation where we know there is so much more, because it is such fertile ground for demagogues to exploit. And the world today is sliding in a direction that is so beneficial to
Yeah.
extremist politicians. And they couldn't have asked for something more productive for their own ends.
Well, and it's also, I think, people who want to exploit the situation. I think there's a couple of things that I think are going to come out of this. And we, like you said, it's like we haven't even seen all of the files. There's so much more, but I think that this is going to make business a lot harder because I think people are going to be very suspicious and mistrust one another, on top of the fact that Donald Trump has levied taxes and has made doing business with the United States so much harder. But I also think that this feeds disinformation. And, you have all of these strong men and all of these authoritarian figures who like to manipulate the media. And I think this is ample fodder for that. And I think Nina Jankowicz is watching this live, and she really works on disinformation and follows this very closely. And she's really been talking about that and the worrying trend that this sets.
Yeah, I mean, imagine what a gift this is to the enemies of the West.
Yes.
And you see how Chinese media are reporting this, and they're delighting in it. This is their proof that the West is broken. This is their proof that democracy is a sham. This is their proof that there's no justice. Countries that are really hardcore dictatorships are really exploiting this to boost their own system and tear down uh, democracies. It's really tragic, and I think it didn't have to be this way. It could have been tackled more forthrightly by the United States, and it would be much less harmful if that had happened.
Okay. Well, we're about at our 30-minute mark. So, any last thoughts, Frida?
Well, I think this is a story that will continue for years to come. Uh, and when there's a change of administration, we will have a new impetus to find what was in here. And I think the prosecutions will come years from now in the United States. And the rest of the world. They are already unfolding.
Well, I hope that for the victims that there is some sort of justice, and I really hope that more of the stories of the victims come out and we listen to them. And I know Natasha's been writing about, the implications that go beyond to NGOs and to charities, and all of that stuff needs to be looked at and researched for the protection of not only women but children and people who just want to live in an open, transparent society.
Amen.
All right, Frida, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I'm excited that we're starting to do these Substack lives together, and so everyone, stay tuned. I think you'll see the Frida and Elmira show uh, come back to you very soon. Thanks,
Okay,
everyone.
it's great doing it. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for joining us.